What's the most satisfying act of revenge that you've ever experienced? When I was about 13/14, there was this kid on the school bus who was about a year older than me and used to pick on me a lot. He was a total arrogant it-dick. One time he came and sat next to me and tried to pull the old "Hey, did you know if your hand is bigger than your face you have cancer?" Basically the idea is you get the person to then hold their hand right against their face, and then you hit their hand, causing them to hit themselves in the face. I wasn't falling for it, so he puts his hand against his own face in order to try and show me what to do. What do I do? Turn his own prank against him and smack his hand into his face. His nose starts bleeding quite badly. God, that felt good. I couldn't stand this one kid who I went to high school with, who lived a few blocks away in the neighborhood. One night, he sent cops to my parents' house where I was still living, telling them I had done something I didn't do. Luckily I had a receipt in my pocket from the restaurant I was at, in suburb 10 miles away that was timestamped half an hour later than when he said the incident occurred. Regardless, my parents were woken up, etc. I was pissed. Well, a few days later, my mom bought some plants that she left in the kitchen window. Our family cat was a nutball to begin with, but all of a sudden he was constantly jumping on the counters, eating these plants. When I'd try and shoo him down, he would actually take a defensive stance and hiss and scratch. 10 minutes later, he would be back, chewing on the leaves. I asked my mom what the plants were, and she said, "Oh, they are catnip. They have a really pretty flower. I'm going to plant them in the backyard when the weather warms up." I was like, "Not a chance you're planting these in our backyard. Look what you're doing to the cat. He's an aggressive stoner. You'll bring every cat in the neighborhood, and they will all fight, all night long." Suddenly, at that exact moment, a revenge plot was born. The following night, I snuck into his backyard and planted the catnip everywhere. My friend who lived across the street from him told me it worked perfectly, and that he was always complaining about cats fighting in his backyard after that. Revenge. No physical confrontation. No property damage. Just stoned cats. Felt a little like some sort of supervillain, sending out my cat minions to do my dirty work. It was actually against me, if that gives you any clue as to how justified and perfect it was. When I was 4 and my brother was 6, we were on our way to my great-grandfather's funeral. My parents stop at McDonald's and out of my brother's small fry bag, the 4.5 inches tall white bag of fries, he pulls an 11 inches fry. Impossible, right? We're in the back seat. I see it. He yells to my parents to witness this awesome fry, but before they can turn around I snatch it and eat it. He is upset. Whatever. Cut to 12 years later. Home after school. No parents. Friends hanging out in the kitchen. Everyone is scurrying around for an after school snack. My brother and I are at the table and our friends are in the other part of the kitchen. Out of this bag of wavy lays I pull a potato chip that is literally the size of my skull. No idea how this thing didn't break in transit. I'm like, oh my god. Guys, look at this chip. Before anyone can even turn their heads, my brother reaches across with his right hand and crushes the chip to crumbs. I have WTF eyes bearing down on him and he simply says, "That's for the fry." 12 years had passed and we had never spoken about it, but it took less than a second to remember everything and just nod in agreement that the score was settled. One enormous potato product for another. True story. Once, in 1st grade, I took off my shoe because I had a rock in it. For no reason other than this kid was a huge asshole. The class jerk stole it and took off running. I chase after him and he eventually throws my shoe down a hill into a field of tall grass and just looks at me with a huge eating grin. In about a stone cold 1st grade's timber I say, "Go find it," and shove him down the hill into the grass after it. He starts crying and we run to the teacher. After explaining what happened, she made him go into the field and find my shoe. He crawled through the grass for about an hour before it finally turned up. At my school we had a douchebag who liked to stand next to his locker talking to one of his friends, and when someone got too close to it he'd slam it open into their face. As there were no cameras near this hallway, it was always dismissed as an accident. Anyways, one day he felt the need to open it into my best friend's face. Gave him a bloody nose and almost broke it. Now, as I'm sure you all would be, I was pissed off. So the day my friend got back, the douche felt the need to approach him to apologize about hitting my friend. Luckily, my locker was located between my friend and the other kid. When I saw I could do it, I casually unlocked my locker, waited for him to get close to it, and slammed it into him. Broke his nose and entered the locker. Revenge is sweet. This one time, when I was about 15-16, I was about to walk inside my building. Had just placed the keys in the lock, when, reflected in the door, I see two girls walking by behind me. I can actually hear one of them say, she points at me, "Let's talk to this guy," but then her friend goes, "No, not him. He's ugly. Let's go." The girl that actually wanted to talk to me was cute and everything. Man. So, not only did her friend cockblock me, so to speak, but she also called me ugly, and that hurt. I walk upstairs, walk into my place and then walk over to the balcony to see if I can spot the girls. They're right across the street, talking to each other, and the cockblocker is being a bit loud and obnoxious. That did it for me. I walk back into the kitchen, grab a slice of ham and swoosh, threw it at the girl. Direct hit. She had a total WTF look on her face which made me smile. Of course, in retrospect, that was a stupid thing to do and I wouldn't do it again. TLDR. Hammer time. Edit. My English are not good. My parents told me when I was 4 years old, my older sister had thrown my new toy truck over the fence intentionally. My dad said he then watched me go into the fridge, grab my sister's cup of juice and mix it with ketchup, mayonnaise, salt, some banana that I had chewed up already, and a whole lot of spit. After that my dad told me I walked into her room and handed her the cup and said, with the lisp I once had, "I forgive you, sissy." I'd been dating a guy for a little over a year when he decided to leave me for this girl he'd been passing off as his best friend. I was always suspicious that there was something between them, but they both assured me there wasn't. I was heartbroken. I've never quite been the same after that. Anyway, I ducked his best friend. That was the first time I'd had a smile on my face in months because I knew it would hurt him. And it did. Also the sex was super hot. I jerked off on the red and that stung me. Telling my crazily cuntish, leg spreading, soul crushing ex-wife that I forgive her. It was the harshest, most devastating thing I could have said to her. My boss had a falling out with her boss and he, boss, decided he would destroy her and everything she cared about. This meant he was going to destroy me too. Since my boss had done a lot to get me where I was, I didn't get fired or officially demoted. But I was moved a few layers deeper on an organization chart and put into a job I used to do 4 years earlier. I got angry for 2 days, then polished my resume and cast it across my large company. A month after it happened, I was flying across the country to interview for the most prestigious RAND organization in my industry, and 3 months after that I was watching someone load my it into a moving van. The evildoer was fired 2 weeks after I started my new job, in the same company, very different division. I never had to file a grievance. My silent determination to get out from under him was the loudest scream, and losing a very promising person made the company really look into him. This kid picked on me since 1st grade, then one day in 4th grade, the teacher had her back turned so he climbed under my table and started pulling faces at me. Not sure why. He was kinda weird. It must have been a knee-jerk reaction, but his face was there and my foot was here, so I kicked him in the face. Kid falls to ground shrieking while clutching his head. Teacher turns around and sees him out of his desk, gives him detention. Later that day, his face had swollen to the size of a volleyball and he had stopped crying long enough to tell the teacher what had happened. My teacher asked me if it was true and I said I felt something tugging on my shoe, so I kicked, thinking it was caught on something. The teacher gave me a lollipop, saying be aware of my surroundings next time. The kid never bothered me again. Best day ever. When I was a young chap, around 6, my brother stole my Game Boy Color and deleted my saved Pokemon games. I worked super hard for the amount of Pokemon I had caught and was quite furious. I later grabbed a butcher knife from the kitchen when my parents weren't home and chased him around the house until he locked himself in the bathroom. I put the blade of the knife under the door and slid it back and forth. He was screaming non-stop and started crying. I eventually stopped after about an hour and let him out. I'm not sure why, but this question made me think back 20 years ago and I felt extremely satisfied at the thought and thought I would share. Lived in a rented house for 7 years next to a psychotic lawn worshipping lady. Hated us for renting. Hated us for not having as much money as her. Made our lives hell. The night before we moved. Loaded U-Haul waiting patiently at the curb. I emptied $100 worth of Roundup in nice D-shaped patterns on her perfectly groomed lawn. Haven't been back. Never saw it. But I take comfort from her pain. As I perceive it. Beating the id out of someone. There's nothing like hurting someone who has wronged you. The feeling of a good punch is great. Seeing them go down is better. Kicking their ribs in is fun too. And that's why no one ever picked on my autistic brother again. One kid, Zach, in my high school spread a lot of it about how I was jealous of him, his life, and his girlfriend, Emily. I wasn't. He was overweight, broke, and his girlfriend was a plank. Still, it pissed me off. He didn't know that I knew that he said all this it. I started convincing him that a girl named Brittany liked him. Brittany was the go-to girl for every guy to like in my high school. Every guy wanted Brittany. After about 2 weeks of convincing him, he posts a bulletin on MySpace. This was a long time ago. About how he isn't sure of his feelings with Emily and wants to move on. Emily saw this and didn't appreciate it very much. The next day, she confronted him. He told her that he loved her. She said no. They break up. Zach wasn't sad. He still had Brittany. That night, I tell him that I ducked with him this entire time because of what he did to me. He didn't believe me. Asked Brittany out. And got rejected. He cried. He went from having 2 girls to 0 in hours. 1. I was living in a rental room at a house in Central Austin in 1990. Danny Dukes was a good friend of the guy I was renting from. After a few altercations of minor drunk incidents, I moved out. At the time I had just gotten a red Doberman Pinscher and brought the dog with me when I moved out. Danny came over one night and stole the dog, while drunk, having liked the dog before. I never got the dog back, but I wished death on that bastard since then. Karma or just luck, or some relation between the two. Danny ended up dying at the behest of an animal after all. The dog thief ended up jumping into Tillicum's pool at SeaWorld in Florida a few years later. He died at SeaWorld having had Tillicum play with him and tossing him around like a rag doll. I heard he was tripping on LSD and had a vision to communicate with the whale. When I heard what had happened, I was joyed to know the bastard got his, even if it was 9 years later. It is the second death listed. Orca, and his medical examiner report. TLDR. Itty roommate's friend steals first dog as a bachelor and ends up getting killed by Shamu years later while tripping acid and venturing into its pool. Thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of my ex-wife's expensive shoes, clothing, and purses may or may not have mysteriously vanished. I may or may not have also kept quite a few of her belongings, kitchen stuff, etc. that may or may not have been hers. This may or may not have had to do with the fact that she cheated on me for my entire marriage and I found out about it right before our court hearing. The above may or may not have been in my garage for storage while she was moving into her new house with a boyfriend. Some of her other belongings may or may not have been damaged in some small way or disappeared. Now ex-wife was cheating on me, threw me and the kids out. We had to move 6 hours away. When I drove back to get mine and the kids' stuff, I caught her and her new BF. Well, you know, she had sworn there was no one else. Yeah, right. I told her that when they left for work I was taking everything in the house. And I did. Right down to the broom and vacuum cleaner. Which made it hard to clean the cigarette ash stains out of the carpet and all the broken glasses off of the linoleum. Also, pissed in the milk. My older sister was always verbally and physically abusive to me. One day we got back from buy candy, and as we're walking she is saying so much that I'll lose my mind. I threw the open pack of Pop Rocks into her face. The moisture of her eyes started making the candy pop. Crying made it worse. But the icing was when she tried to flush it out with the garden hose, creating, what I imagine based on her screams, the most painful experience with candy ever. On a plane. Guy in the seat in front of me, who I'd never met before, starts up a conversation that goes on for too long. At a certain point, he is standing up in the aisle to get closer, continuing to jabber on. While I am trying to be polite and listen, he continues for so long that the flight attendant asks him to sit down, since he is blocking her cart and drink service. He refuses, saying he is talking to his friend, that is, me. At the end of the flight, he asks the flight attendant for her name, which she provides. He then says he's going to report her to airline management and file a complaint about her being rude to customers, that is, him. Shocked flight attendant asks him if she can get his name, saying it's only fair because he has hers. She asks him 1 or 2 times, then drops it when the douchebag refuses to identify himself. At the end of the flight, as passengers get off the plane, I fumble with my luggage so as not to have to follow the douchebag immediately off the plane. I find the aggrieved flight attendant and hand her the douchebag's business card, which he had tried to give me earlier. She seemed relieved. I felt profound satisfaction. I let the guy my girlfriend of 2 years was cheating with have her. She then went on to make his life miserable for 2 years. Then he stalked her for at least a year after she broke up with him. So, by letting go of a cheater, both their lives were hell for at least 3 years. I think I won. For years and years in late elementary school and most of middle school, this one kid would just bully me constantly. Towards the end of 8th grade it had gotten pretty bad, and I really just wanted it to end. Let's call him Chris. When looking for a lost parrot on my property, I found the bottom half of some animal, may have been a muskrat, groundhog, or something similar, but I couldn't be sure exactly what, under a tree, and brought it back to the house. I then called my mom, who was out of town traveling at the time, how I'd go about making it stop stinking. This was before I could really just Google it. She wouldn't really help me because I wouldn't tell her why I wanted to disinfect a dead rodent, but I let it sit out in the sun. This was late May, for a few days, and that killed most of the bugs and whatnot. I then wrapped it up in butcher paper and put it in a paper bag. I then wrote, "Dear Chris, you forgot your lunch this morning. Love, Mom" on it. Chris always brought a bagged lunch into school every single day. In the morning after the first class period started, I went to his locker. No one locked theirs, and put it in his locker. After first period you could hear the screech from the floor below, along with everyone else. I ran towards the sound and saw Chris walking down the hallway sobbing. I didn't do much to hide the fact that I did it, and was given a day of in-school suspension. The principal didn't find the humor in negotiating for a half day since it was only half a rodent. Chris never really messed with me after that. I once had this guy who was interested in me, capital I, however, had recently started dating someone else. The guy turned quite nasty, taking himself from the friend zone to the creepy stalker zone. One of the things he liked to do was come through my register, where I worked at a supermarket. One night he came in, particularly drunk and obnoxious. He asked me where my boyfriend was tonight. I ignored him. He then asked me for a carton of cigarettes, so I asked him for his ID. By law, I had to ask anyone who looked under 34 ID. I knew this guy was over 18, but duck him. He was being a cunt. And he's all like AWW come on Sparkles 0589. You know me. I replied, very professionally and sweetly, I'm not allowed to serve you without ID. He didn't have it with him, so he started ranting and raving about how I'm H etc. Security made him disappear quite quickly. TL. DRSTRAYA. Don't duck with the girl who is between you and your nicotine fix. You dumb cunt. Edit. Formatting. 10 gallons of cow right on their car. Not saying it was mature, but damn it felt nice. Well, this bastard of a guy was able to convince my 16-year-old sister to start a family and that her entire family is against her and how them two would end up in a storybook ending. All the while he was ducking around with any chick who would even want to get with him. Well, I waited until the end of the school year, which at the time was my senior year, to strike. I already knew a pretty bad security hole which granted anyone access to everyone's network drives, and I then proceeded to permanently delete all of his finals work just before finals week. I figured it would work since he was stupid enough to not ever have backups of anything. Oh, that sweet hit of revenge happened when I heard from some people that he ended up getting zeros on all of his finals and the IT guys had no recovery. TLDR. Bastard wrongs my sister. Wiped all his finals work just before finals. Profited. This was in year 7. Secondary school. Don't know what that is in America. So pardon me, Polish guy who came to England is being rude, calling names and acting like a general art about my grandfather being German. My grandfather, I never met him. He died before I was born. Actually wanted to fight against Hitler. Was a big game hunter and an awesome zoologist. He said all Germans were Nazis, were evil and stuff like that. We were in German class, where he said stuff about Germany most of the time, and we were chosen to sit next to each other. After insulting me and mocking me in front of the whole class, as we're about to leave I see Red and punch him and kick him right in his head and ass. All the popular kids in class laughed and congratulated me. I wasn't very popular and had few friends, so this was great, and I was so happy. Worth the internal exclusion though. Bullied in elementary school. Punched in the stomach in the locker room so no visible bruises. Oh, this bully had it down pat. One day after soccer when he hit me so hard in the head that I saw stars and the coach did nothing. Part of the game. I snapped. The field was next to a rolling grassy hill sloping down to the parking lot. So I grabbed the bully's wrist and double suicide leaped off the field. As we rolled down the hill I could feel little satisfying snaps from his arm and hear his little kid screams. So satisfying. Well, since I wasn't as smart in my revenge as the bully was in his abuse, did this in front of a team of witnesses. I got dragged to the principal's office where I was told only animals behave like that. The bully had to wear a cast and sling. And since he was popular he got plenty of sympathizers to sign it and all that. Doesn't matter. Got revenge. And best of all, he left me alone. Although he could now openly call me out as the spaz, and my folks decided it was a good idea for me to switch schools after that year. TL. DR broke bully's arm. Much joy.